Yeah, there's some steps there for you.
Well, number 6, you rock. So, although there are many little campsite areas around this well 3, little diversion tracks everywhere, you need to contend with those flies. And at least when we were here, they were next level. They were as high in number as I think I've ever seen anywhere.
They were getting worse.
And yes, they were calling their friends, saying, "Hey, party on this person's back."
You'd have to arrive here in the dark and leave before it warmed up at all.
Yes. Now maybe that'll change, of course, as things dry out, but certainly with everything as damp as it is, ooh-wee. So there's the well off to our right, and we're taking the canning to the left. Tricky little creek crossing here. Ah, yes. A deep little hole there on the left-hand side.
Kilometers from well 3A, and look at all the bird nests in the treetops. Very cool. Yeah, there's some steps there for you.
Give way, and CSR straight ahead, and a cross track. Give way.
Go back. Wrong way, go back, it says. That's cool.
We have just crossed over the Bridal Face Road.
I'm just looking at some white daisies, like paper daisies. They're really pretty. Flies are fierce here too. Hello, cows. There you are, bringing us all these flies. Thanks very much. When we eat you later, then you'll be sorry.
You should eat you and they're gone.
Well, number 3A. What comes to mind here? Cactus. This one is totally stuffed. It's about a 3-kilometer diversion off the Canning Stock Route main road. Oh, look at this little plant. It's got little white puffballs or pom-poms and little red skewers sticking out of them. Yeah, it's really neat. This is at well 3A. Jill's checking out the plant there. It gives you a little bit of an idea for a scale point of view. We're leaving well 3A through this beautiful green meadow, and this meadow is full of flies, billions of them.
It's growing flies.
It is growing flies. 3A is about 3 kilometers off of the main Canning Stock Route track. So you got to do a 6K round trip diversion to get to it. And as you saw, it is cactus. We're heading back to the main Canning Stock Route track now. We've entered a little section on the track now that is marked on our map as a swamp. So this must be pretty swampy when it's wet, I guess. Very few trees, little islands of trees here and there, but overall, not many at all. We're in between well 3A and 4. Well, this is an interesting little development. We're in a giant gibber field with a few green plants and a big salt lake off to our right, which I think is another one of those Lake
Nabaroo.
Lake Nabaroo. There's about 10 Lake Nabaroos here, and there's mining activity back here, or mining exploration activity here anyway, all over the place.
Yeah, they're scraping and testing everywhere. We've seen a few like utes.
Diggers.
Yep, scrapers, diggers. Fuel tanker as well, and It's really weird because you felt so isolated one minute, and then the next minute you're like, we're in mining exploration country, and it's like we're near Newman again.
Yeah, it's weird.
Lake Nabaroo is where we are, and they have a lot of water in them, and there's bird life here. Here comes the drone, and he's filming really cool waves. Filming how glary it gets in this iron ore looking rock. Terry's starting a fire.
Driving up the face of that should be a lot of fun. Good morning, shining happy people.
I have that song stuck in my head.
We've left camp not long now, maybe a kilometer or two. We're heading through a place called Snell Pass. We got a little bit of a range on our left and a little bit of a range on our right. And the pass runs through the middle, obviously. A little bit of a tip for those who might be wanting to do the canning and who do like filming, and particularly if you've got dash camera footage. I would suggest you go north to south, because going south to north, you're pointed into the rising sun for a good portion of the day. Even in the afternoon when the sun starts setting, remember you're traveling in a northeasterly direction, so you're always pointed towards that sun a little bit, and it washes all the colors out. So if you value dash footage, go north to south. I thought what I might do is just share with the viewers a little bit about who I am and where I came from and what makes me tick. And if you don't like stories like this, skip forward about 5 minutes or so, maybe less, because it'll be a short story. I was born in a little town called Leamington and lived my entire life in Canada in a town called Wheatley, which was just neighboring Leamington. It just didn't have a hospital. It wasn't big enough. Wheatley was about 1,500 people, and it had one traffic light at the four corners. We lived out of town, right on the Great Lakes, right on Lake Erie. And my mom and dad still live in the house that I grew up in. So for us as kids, our entire existence revolved around that lake and things to do around the lake. And for the viewers in Australia, just to give you a little bit of perspective of what the Great Lakes are like, because we live in such an arid country here, if you haven't seen them before, it's tough to wrap your head around them. Imagine standing at a lake shore and looking left, and that lake shore goes off into the horizon. Looking right, that lake shore goes off into the horizon, and looking straight ahead, and you can't see the other side of the lake. That's the scale of these lakes. I lived on Lake Erie, which was the smallest. I think it's the smallest. Maybe Ontario was the smallest, but either the smallest or second smallest of the Great Lakes, and it's still massive. You still can't see the other side. So that kind of gives you a little bit of perspective about the amount of water and it is all fresh, which is something you can't wrap your head around here in Australia, because nothing like that exists here. So I guess it's kind of like standing on the ocean, except for it's fresh. So our entire lives as kids revolved around that lake. We go not too far from where I lived, certainly within an easy bicycle journey, was a marsh called the Hillman Marsh, and we spent a lot of time in that marsh. Like we have in Australia, there's a lot of problems with feral animals, and in that marsh it was loaded with carp. And I can remember when I was a kid going out with our spears and spearing carp in that marsh, and they were thick. There were times in there where you could walk across the top of them. There were that many of them. We just spear them and chuck them up on the bank and let the seagulls or whoever's going to prey upon them munch them. We spent a whole bunch of time canoeing through the marsh and exploring all the little nooks and crannies. I remember one nook and cranny that I explored, and there was two cars. There was a 57 Chevy and a 57 Ford Fairlane that were sitting bum up in the marsh. I'm sure they're probably still there to this day, but that was pretty cool. They were wrecked and somebody had just trashed them there into the marsh. As kids, we used to get into all sorts of mischief around that lake as well. We lived not too far from the largest freshwater fishing fleet in Canada at Wheatley Harbour, and that was an easy walk from our place. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of our childhood, playing around that harbour. And I remember the fishing boats would come in from an afternoon fish, and us kids would dive into the water and swim across the harbor from one jetty to the other jetty with the boats coming in towards us, and we'd race the boats. So boats are coming in and we'd swim diagonally across the bow and race them. I look back at that now and just shake my head and say, you freaking idiot. What would have happened if you wouldn't have made it? That bloody boat would have chopped you up. And these were big boats too. You know, they're 100 foot long was the biggest one. I remember once the most, I guess, probably dangerous situation that we were in as kids. It was in the winter time, and the pack ice had moved into the lake. And we canoed out a long distance, probably about 1 kilometer, and the pack ice started to move in. So we climbed out of the canoe and we started jumping from these large sort of fridge-sized pieces of ice from one to the next. Just playing around as kids do. And you know, the ice would sort of tumble as you're on it. It's almost like what do they do if they run on the logs? Those log rolls? Something like that. But of course, if that refrigerator-sized piece of ice ever rolled quickly enough and you fell in between the two of them, you'd never get out of there. And I can remember my dad, he was on the shore. I don't know how he got wind of what we were doing, but anyway, he did as dads do, and he's on the shore and he's looking out at us and he's screaming at us. We're saying, get your asses in here, which we did. We duly obliged, and we got into shore and he kicked our asses. Just saying, you know, what the hell were you guys thinking? Do you know how dangerous that was? Which it was. I look back on it now again as an adult and go, he's a stupid kid.
I grew up on a neighboring Great Lake to Terry. I grew up just at the base of Lake Huron where it feeds into the St. Clair River, and also had quite a water-based childhood as well. Started learning to swim as soon as, you know, you could start teaching back then. We were probably 3. My mom never knew how to swim, and so she made sure that my sister and I were darn well going to learn how to swim. That and ice skating. So we did figure skating as well, because she never learned to do that either. So grew up in Sarnia, also as a big petrochemical location. That's where some of the pipelines from Alaska end up for refining and oil, plastics, all of that kind of stuff. The big companies are all there, and it looks quite industrial. When I was a little kid, it used to smell pretty awful.
From somebody who didn't grow up there and obviously met Jill and spent time in Sarnia, I can attest to the smell there, and I was not used to it. Jill got used to it after years and years and years, but I never did.
Obviously, the environmental rules and everything are much stronger now. Great access to parks and outdoor activities and
fishing on the lake.
Fishing was huge. My dad was a tremendous fisherman. He absolutely loved it. Grew up camping as many weekends as possible when we were kids, and we used to camp on the back of a friend's farm in Michigan. A group of us, we were called the Border Jumpers. There was half Americans, half Canadians, and we met up on the weekends for party time. The dads would hang out, the moms would hang out, and the kids would all wait till mom and dad were a little bit snapped, and then we'd all ask, can we have this snack, can we have that snack, can we do this? And a giant glob of kids ran around with a giant glob of dogs of every shape and size, and honestly, it was awesome. We made forts, we went swimming, we played hide and seek in the cornfields, and you couldn't ask for a better childhood that way. Actually grew up in a pretty low socioeconomic area. We lived there, it was close to the hospital where my mom was a registered nurse in emergency. A lot of the kids that I went to school with had a pretty hard life at home. I didn't really understand all of it at the time when you're in primary school, of course. Amazingly, somehow I ended up working in child protection. Later, I could talk with all those kids and saw them on the same level as me, of people who grew up in less than ideal environments, and try and help them to have a better chance in life. But I wouldn't have predicted I would end up doing that. My sister Penny and I were the kids that were going, but why can't we stay out till 11 o'clock at night? My mom's like, because we love you. Because you shouldn't be out at 11 o'clock at night. We thought we were hard done by, but we really weren't. No, we had awesome parents, so very grateful for that.
The truck's kind of looped around and we're crossing the Kennedy Creek again, or at least we're running right next to it. We're at well 4A, and this is unique and the first time I've seen this, although we've only been at 4 wells. But there's a tree, an original tree, and they've drilled a pulley into the top of it, and that pulley was used to lever the bucket up over the well. You dump your water in the trough and it'll run down the trough and your cattle would get their drink. Cool.
Curtin University, 2010. We're right on the banks of the river.
And at this point in time, we've got a little bit of water in it. That pool, I'm sure, is very much seasonal.
Beautiful tree here. Gonna come over for a look. Yeah, check that out. That's a big gum tree.
Apparently this well, 4A and 4B, these were put in at a later date, somewhere around about 1929. And maybe that answers one of my questions, which is, why are there A's and B's? So there's wells 1, 2, 3, 4, and then every once in a while you'll get an A thrown in, a 4A or a 3B. But maybe the original numbering is Canning's, and then the latter ones with your A's and B's were put in by people like Snell after the original Canning wells went in. Oh, you're kidding me. Gate on the Canning stock route.
It's only one gate.
Yeah,
it's not even a double gate.
Why don't you get the gate then?
No. Get you your exercise so you don't get stiffened up.
It's got insulators on it, so it is electrified. We are pulling into the campsite of Windage Springs. And according to our map, this is one of the most delightful areas on the Canning. There's apparently toilets and picnic tables and...
I see a barbecue. I see multiple picnic tables, another barbecue, drop toilet,
dump point, and 1 kilometer walking circuit. Well, this is Windage Springs, and according to that little interpretive center that I just visited, this was a meeting place for Aboriginals for thousands of years, and you can understand why. If this isn't a permanent water hole, it'd be bloody close to it.
I can see why this is so significant.
It really is a peaceful and picturesque little spot here. Unfortunately, you can't camp next to the river. It's all fenced off, so you got to camp up in the campground that you pass when you come in. You could definitely grab water here as well. Now apparently the water needs to be treated, but if you're just picking up a jerry can for your showers or something like that, this stuff is perfectly fine. It's clear as. I don't normally like making shit videos, but this one's kind of interesting. This is the long drop at Windage Springs. Check this out. You shit into a trailer, you hook the trailer up, and you cart the waste away and bury it. That's pretty cool. This is the main camping area at Windage Springs. You can see here you got picnic tables, you got these fire pits or these fire rings as well with a Barbie plate, and the river is over there where you can see those white barked gum trees. So would I camp at Windage Springs? The answer to that for me is no. And I guess I got three main reasons for that. One, this is a popular camping area, so you might actually bump into somebody, which would suck out here. Two, this place has been picked clean of firewood, so if you haven't brought any firewood in, you ain't having a fire. And three, the attractiveness, of course, is the river. And it's such a large distance from the river, you're basically just camped in an open paddock on the opposite side of the fence. We've had 2 bush camps now out on the Canning, and both of them would have left this for dead, and we were simply camped at the side of the track. It always mystifies me why somebody would start a fire here when you've got a ring with a Barbie plate 10 meters away. It does surprise me that picnic tables are provided out here, because obviously you're out here on the Canning and you're completely self-sufficient, so you would have your own table facilities. It's a wonderful gesture and I do appreciate it, but I don't think they're used all that often. And if you have a look at the grass growing underneath of this picnic table, I'd suggest that's probably the case. I suppose if I was doing the Canning on my WR450, my motorbike, I'd definitely use these tables. I'd say over 95% of the traffic on the Canning would be four-wheel drive vehicles as opposed to bikes. We've just come from there and we're going there. Bye-bye, Windage Springs. Thanks for the hospitality. We are only 750 odd meters from well 4B, and my suspicion was right. The numbered wells with just numbers, those are Canning wells, and ones that have A's or B's on them were put in after Canning put his in. So this particular one, 4B, was put in 1929. I think the original wells were 1911. The other thing that I've worked out is Canning and his crew obviously left Wiluna and worked their way north, and that's why the wells are numbered 1 to 51 in a northerly direction. But the stock route itself was actually used from north to south. So it was to get cattle from the northern properties down to the south where they could get to the markets. Oh, have a look at that. Somebody's come off the track 1 car width, and they've gone down to the chassis.
They just must have been paying attention.
We are at well 4B, which is obviously very much disused and falling into ruin. Got a crank handle lying on the floor. We got a bucket to get your water up in, the trough where the water was tipped into, and the well itself. Is there any water in it? There is, but it's shallow and scummy. It's an imposter. It was not put in by the original Canning party in 1911. It was put in after the fact by Snell in 1929. Don't want to take away from the hard work that those boys put in, but it was not one of the originals. We're now entering these kind of, I don't know, alluvial areas, I guess, where the water has been rushing down here, spreading out everywhere.
The countryside has been so changeable.
One of the rare opportunities where we're doing 40 kilometers an hour.
Nice, Terry. Just wanting to film this beautiful bush that we keep seeing everywhere, of all different sizes and all different amounts of, how in bloom they are. Some have bloomed and the little fluffy yellow things have fallen off. They're really pretty.
Rolling into well number 5.
Do 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 do. It's instead of Mambo number 5. It just made me think of that.
Holy guacamole! That's gonna take me forever to winch that sucker.
It's a long way down.
It's a long way down.
Yeah, that's a long way.
Okay. Oh, that's not too hard. Oh, there's the bucket. Keep going. Keep going. Okay. Here you go, animals. Okay. Well, Jill and I were just lamenting about the track around Wells 3, 4, 5 and how ordinary it is. And it's been a pretty boring day's driving from a scenic perspective. And then whammo, we come out of the scrub and we've got sand dunes in front of us and a couple of decent sized column mountains.
Yeah, there's Mount Salvato I can see on the map.
So yeah, there are certainly long stretches of the canning where you're just going through scrub and it's a pretty grueling sort of a drive. And when I say grueling, I don't mean difficult. I just mean that it is very repetitive. But what we have found with the canning is as soon as you think you know what it is, boom, it throws something different at you. Well, looky there, proper sand dunes. It's almost like we're back at Goog's track. That sand dune there's actually got a little bit of drifting on the top of it. That was amazing scenery around here. You've got these sand dunes, which are awesome to begin with. Then interspersed in the dunes are grass trees, Xanthorrhoea australis, which I've never, ever seen in sand country before, interspersed with sand dunes like this. So that is amazing. And then just there in the 11 o'clock position, we pull onto these sand dunes, and there's a granite or a rocky hill. So in one breath earlier, I was saying, yeah, the track's been pretty mundane for the morning drive, which it has. It all of a sudden turns it on. Unbelievable. We're only a kilometer or so from well number 6. I've often wondered how Canning found all the areas to dig for these wells, and no doubt he had some natives helping him as well. But with this one, I reckon I could have picked it. You got nothing around anywhere, just this low scrub. And then all of a sudden you got a bunch of very, very large sized trees. If that's not a dead giveaway for water, I don't know what is. And check this out. Seriously big giant trees in the middle of the desert. Oh wow. That is cool. What a lovely little spot. Look at the size of some of these trees. Whew.
Pierre Spring, it says on the sign over here. Wow.